Hi, I'm Soraya Mia, and you're watching It's About Youth. Now, over 40,200 people have died in Gaza since October last year, as Israel continues its genocide in the besieged enclave. Now, unfortunately, the death toll mostly includes innocent civilians, as well as over 280 humanitarian workers. Now, this is according to the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA. Now, in today's discussion, we'll delve into the crucial topic of protecting humanitarian workers, as well as the role of youth in humanitarian action, as well as advocacy in Gaza. Now, let me introduce our guest for today, Hafizah Shamsudin from Viva Palestina Malaysia.
Hi.
As well as Aisyah Shofi, who is a volunteer in Cinta, Gaza, Malaysia. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, about 200 humanitarian workers have been killed, since Israel has launched a genocide in Gaza, basically. And this number, of course, we don't know how accurate this is because the situation is continuously developing. But I'd like to ask Noor, if you know, the true situation in Gaza right now when it comes to humanitarian aid delivery.
So it's difficult to give you a clear picture as to what the true situation is as we speak, only because it's constantly evolving. What it was 5 minutes ago might not be the same as what it is now. For Viva Palestina Malaysia, we've been able to source aid locally within Gaza, so that is the aid that we are distributing. We're also involved in getting clean water for the civilians that are there. However, as I told you, it's continuously evolving. Sometimes our projects are blown up. So we have to take it on a day-to-day and sometimes hour-to-hour basis.
Yeah, I understand. Now, in the local context, right, Aisyah, what do you think the role of youth plays when it comes to advocacy to the situation in Gaza right now?
So, in my view, the biggest role that the youth can play is maximizing our resources and our tools, and namely social media. All right, so social media is one of, if not the most powerful tool that we have right now. And the repost button itself it holds a lot more power than we think it does. And the action of reposting has to stop being downplayed, because no matter how few your followers are, what if one of your followers has 10,000 followers and they see a repost from your story and then they repost it from there? That's, the butterfly effect in itself. So the biggest, most helpful, most impactful thing that the youth can do is to spread the right information, spread the right narrative, spread the right version of history before further courses of action can be taken, like fundraising and volunteering and all the other stuff. It has to start with education and getting information. So yeah, maximizing resources like social media and raising Palestinian voices and stories.
Before we get into more about, information, educating ourselves, especially about the topic that we're discussing right now, maybe you'd like to add on to what you think, the role of Malaysian youth can do in helping innocent civilians in Gaza?
I think what Aisyah said was completely on point, especially when she spoke about having and giving out the correct and accurate message. So unfortunately, one of the minus points of social media is that negative voices and also untrue news gets amplified as well. So always check what are the sources of the information that you're sharing. Make sure that that is the right information. Make sure that that is the most current number. If you're sharing in terms of death toll, if you're sharing in terms of those injured, we don't want to miss anyone out. So make sure that whatever you're sharing is from a credible source. So I think what she said was completely on point. And we should not stop at just sharing on social media. I think it is important to have conversations with those within your peer influence. Some might be too shy to repost for whatever reason. Some might think that they don't know enough. So they shy away from posting things on social media. So maybe just having a conversation within your social circle and those that you have influence over would be helpful as well.
Right. So definitely getting information from the right source and is very important. But then, as we know, social media it comes with a lot of, there's a lot of good things about it, and there's also a lot of downside. Misinformation is out there. So how do you actually tackle this problem? Would you like to take this?
So tackling misinformation, first of all, in the context of the Palestinian genocide, the word misinformation is only so synonymous, not with the Palestinian side, but with the Israeli and the Zionist side. And the form of misinformation that they're getting is not because they are undereducated, but because they are overeducated, but on the wrong narrative, on the wrong side of history. They are, even if you take a look at the Zionist regime, if you look at the Israeli apartheid regime, even on the surface, you would see clearly that it's so inhumane, that it's so, it's dehumanizing. In the eyes of Zionists, Palestinians are in a lower class than even like donkeys and dogs. They're in a lower class than animals. So, but to them, this is all they've ever been taught. This is all they've ever known since birth. They've been indoctrinated with this narrative. And so that's the biggest form of misinformation in this context. When it comes to the fear of us spreading misinformation about the current situation in Palestine, it's a lot more rare to happen, especially with all the footage that's happening in real time that we're getting, the live footage that we're getting, what more with all the Gazan and Palestinian creators that are verified on social media. So it's safe to say that we have an ample amount of authentic and accurate media and information out there right now. But even so, when you are in doubt of something that's actually happening or not, let's say a page that you find is reposting something about Palestine and it seems a little sketchy, then verify it by maybe cross-checking it, cross-referencing it with accounts that you do know hold and share correct information. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that point. And also leads back to your point just now about having conversations with your peers and with people, even on social media. But when we talk about conversations that we have on social media, of course we know that the narrative in Malaysia, as Aisyah has mentioned, is pretty straightforward, right? But then when we talk to sometimes relatives overseas, it can be a little bit, I would say, tricky or challenging to have the conversation. So what do you think, or what are ways to, advocate for the Palestinian cause to say people in other countries that is not Malaysia, that it doesn't have like a very straightforward, support to Palestine?
I think the best way to do this is to just amplify the voices that are coming out of Palestine. There really isn't much for us to do. We're sitting very comfortably at home. We're in very safe situations, alhamdulillah. But what we need to remember is these people are literally victims day in and day out. And they are doing the hard work of documenting what they're going through, using their voices, using the limited internet and whatever that they have to get their voices out. So the least that we can do is, like Aisyah said, we repost, we just amplify those voices, because you really can't fight with what the truth is. Finally, at the end of the day, the truth will come out. And the truth of what they're going through and what they're posting on a daily basis will resonate with anyone who has a heart. And this goes to whether you're talking to someone outside of Malaysia and even within Malaysia. We're often tricked into thinking that all Malaysians are on the side of Palestinians. And I think of late, we've come to a realization that that might not always be true. So just have those conversations. They might be difficult, but if we stick to the facts and we stick to simply what is happening on the ground now and what has been happening since October the 7th, I think the truth will prevail at the end of the day.
Absolutely agree with that. Now, Aisyah, since you have been, doing advocacy online for the Palestinian cause for about 2 years, 2 to 3 years right now, what do you think are the challenges, aside from misinformation, that you face when doing your work?
Okay, so that's a really good question, because I've experienced this firsthand. During the heaviest onslaught around the first few weeks from 7th October, I realized that my stories that I've been sharing on the whole onslaught were being shadow banned, meaning my followers weren't being able to see my stories. So say I have posted a story that has no regard at all to the situation, to the Palestinian situation, and then I have 3 stories about the genocide, maybe death tolls or videos or whatever, and then the 5th story is something else unrelated. I would get hundreds or up to thousands of views on the 1st and 5th story, but the 3 stories in between barely surpass 20. Wow. Yeah, so that's shadow banning in itself. And when I share about that, when I say, look, look at the numbers, look at the difference in these numbers, my followers would reply to that and they would say, oh my God, this is so true. When I tap on your profile, I can only see 2 stories. I don't see the other 3 in between. And exactly. So unfortunately, the people who hold onto big media, the people who are in charge of big media, they side with and benefit from the oppressors. So that is most definitely the biggest challenge when it comes to social media advocacy, is just getting silenced. It's getting silenced, it's getting your content removed, getting your account banned. That's why Cinta Gaza Malaysia also has like a backup account. And I think for anyone who does advocate for Palestine should have a backup account and post regularly on that as well, the way the bigger accounts have done.
And just a follow-up question on that, have you personally been banned from any postings?
No, not yet.
But shadow banned?
Yeah, shadow banned, yes.
Okay.
Never been completely banned. It's never come to the point where I couldn't log into my account.
All right.
I hope that never happens, but yeah, it's never gotten to that point.
Okay, that's good to know. But I mean, I have personally also experienced that, even posting a repost, a simple repost that has nothing, provocative or anything, but has to do with the situation. And then the story gets like really little likes.
Yeah.
Now, Noor, I was going to ask you, so Viva Palestina has been around since
2009.
2009.
We were incepted in 2009, yes.
So that's a long time ago. Now, in your experience of working with Viva Palestina Malaysia, how do you see the difference in terms of humanitarian work back then, as well as the work now, and especially with the rise of social media now, things have definitely changed. So do you see any difference?
Huge difference. When we started in 2009, first of all, I was still in school. And now I'm a mom. So that's a huge difference in itself. So a lot of time has passed. And in 2009, we were mostly relying on print media. So if we had fundraisers or if we had like charity bazaars, that was a thing back then. Instead of social media gathering of funds, we had charity bazaars. So the way we would do that was to get it out in print media.
Okay.
And back then we only had, I think it was Facebook, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the first social media outlets that we used. But fast forward to today, all we need is an Instagram story of a couple of seconds and alhamdulillah, funds come pouring in. So just in terms of fundraising, social media has helped a huge amount. Another way it's helped is that we are able to almost immediately update our donors as to what their money is being used for. So on a daily basis, we update our Instagram and Facebook accounts as to what the money that has been channeled to us is being used for on that day. So for example, whether we have hot meals, whether we're starting a new water sanitation project, all those things are updated on our social media. So the transparency of where the funds are being allocated is also very easily put forth to our donors.
Yeah, I like how you talk about the transparency, because that brings me to the next question I would like to ask Aisyah. Actually, you earlier said that you have with Cinta Gaza Malaysia, you also help to raise funds, right?
Yeah.
And you have like a link or something that people can,
a fundraising link,
directly donate. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, as well as maybe the challenges, because some people have complained that there are many sort of links that are fake, right? Because as much as we know that social media has its good sides, as I mentioned earlier, it also has a lot of scam opportunities. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, as for Cinta Gaza Malaysia, when it comes to transparency with donations and fundraising, they are as transparent as possible when it comes to their donors. They even have a department. They have a department within their office for donor relations. So they stay in touch with donors and they talk about where their money is going. They talk about what their money is being used for. They talk about whether your money is being used for operational costs or sanitation projects or processing daging korban, you know. So yeah, when it comes to Cinta Gaza Malaysia's fundraising regime, they are super transparent with donations and with their donors. They keep that healthy relationship.
If I can just add on, I think earlier when I was talking about misinformation, I don't think I was I mostly meant misinformation about where money is going and whether or not aid is truly reaching the Palestinian people. I think a lot of the time we get really delusioned or sometimes eluded with the fact that the aid really isn't reaching them and people are taking advantage of the sentiments that people have. And I don't think that's necessarily true. So just be careful about where you're sending your funds to. So people with audited accounts like Viva Palestina Malaysia, I'm pretty sure Cinta Gaza also has audited accounts. Yeah. So you want to look for organizations like that, just to make sure that you are responsible for where your money is going as well, and not just pushing it off to the next person.
Yeah, I think that's very important, especially in the beginning of the genocide. People didn't know how to help, and then there were many reports of saying that the aid themselves or the money did not even reach people in Gaza. So I think at least now it probably would be more straightforward and more easier, the situation.
I think for most large organizations that are collecting funds, we've established a safe way and a more secure way rather in sending funds over, because we can't do it directly. But there are ways that we have come up with to send the funds over to source for things on the ground. Because as we know, actual aid doesn't get in because of the blockade of Rafah.
Right.
Yeah, so Israel has controlled Rafah completely and they have control over what aid goes in. So they can decide today that a pair of scissors can't go in, or needles can't go in, or vaccines can't go in, and you don't have a right to question it. So for a lot of humanitarian workers and aid workers, we source for funds within Gaza.
Wow. But yeah, now back to the local context of Malaysians and Malaysian youth helping people in Gaza. So how do you think the government can further support the people, especially when it comes to, maybe I'll start with Aisyah, when it comes to online advocacy, because MCMC has definitely showed interest in controlling more of the social media content that comes out for the better reasons, to avoid scams, to avoid misinformation. Do you have anything to say, like hopes maybe for the government to better support
the cause?
Yeah, the cause.
I would say when it comes to the advocacy for the cause as a whole, one major thing that I realized we could do is be a lot more louder with our boycotts, because Malaysia, first and foremost, has been globally recognized as one of the loudest countries that supports Palestine, and we are publicly and proudly doing that. And I think we could take a step further and maybe take example from countries like Ireland and Holland, who have been showing really loud and really public acts of boycotting. For example, in that one shopping mall in Amsterdam during Christmas shopping, there were flyers just dropping down. And in Ireland, there are a bunch of protesters pasting stickers to boycott Israeli products in supermarkets and malls and such. So I think, that's on more of a people level, more of a grassroots level, but at the same time, it's not impossible that the government could be more vocal about, boycotting and maybe banning brands that are Israeli linked and, halting the support for Israel and the IOF as a whole.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about, the boycott initiative in Malaysia, but before that, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you hope the government could do more to support, the humanitarian cause in Gaza.
Just if I can backtrack a little bit, your question about government support in social media and MCMC, I think the government did a really good thing when they called Facebook in and they asked them why did they remove their posts. when the Hamas leader unfortunately passed away. So I think that in itself is a very loud statement by the government saying that you can't silence us. And if you can't silence them, then I think the big media will think a couple of times before they start silencing the Malaysian people. In terms of getting youth more involved with humanitarian work, I think at the end of the day, it is in the hands of the youth themselves. Government can come up with all kinds of initiatives. Even tertiary education centers have all kinds of initiatives. But it is up to youth themselves to take it upon themselves and look around and realize how lucky we are to be living in a place like Malaysia, where we're not faced with famine, we're not faced with bomb threats. We live in a relatively peaceful home. What can we do to help others around us? And I think social media is helping those who care get a better sense of what's going on around the world and helping them find ways in how to make their voices heard. In terms of what the government can do for Palestine, I think what they've done most recently by bringing in injured Palestinians has to be commended and has to be commended louder. We need to be louder than the people that are saying that this was a mistake. We need to commend the good things that are being done, and this was an exemplary effort. We are a small nation, but this was a huge step. And I think a lot of nations will look at us and say, why didn't we do that before them? So really good done. Really good job for that.
Yeah, and I believe that, or at least I hope that more of these efforts will be done in the near future. Now we have about just 2 minutes left. I would like to talk a bit more about, the boycott initiative in Malaysia. Now, of course, we understand that boycotting is a way to advocate for the Palestinian cause, but it's how many months has it been? It's almost a year since October, or since the genocide, basically, and some people are still probably strongly boycotting, and then some maybe have gone a little bit more ease with it, right? So I'd like to get both of your thoughts, just a quick one about this, and also how to combat people who also go online and then do this like online hate to people who choose to boycott or even choose to not boycott. So how do we go about the situation?
Okay, so me personally, on one hand, if it is a situation where this individual cannot afford to boycott a product, for example, there is a brand of diapers that only that specific brand of diapers can be worn by their child, perhaps, and they can't afford to boycott that, then it's not right to go and, send hate to that person and, call them a murderer or whatever. On the other hand, it's important that we don't just go about, and if we can, for those of us who can afford to boycott products and brands, then we do it, and we spread more information about what products and what brands to boycott. But again, for the first case, if that person cannot afford to boycott it, then it's not right to send hate towards them, because in that context, the whole why aren't you willing to suffer a little bit since they're suffering a lot more, over there, that maxim has been wildly misused and wildly, abused. So yeah, there's two sides to this. Keep boycotting whenever you can, but for those of you who can't, and for the people who can't, don't send hate their way.
Yeah. Moral policing has never done anyone any good. So in terms of boycotts, we're really blessed. We have lots of choice in this country,
That's true.
If you don't want to drink coffee from one place, there's 10 others to choose from. Well, at least in Kuala Lumpur, there's lots of choice. And we can support local coffee chains. We can support local fast food chains. We can support, conglomerates that don't support land grabbing and genocide. So inform yourselves, get informed, and do the right thing. I think as long as you are aware of the power of your ringgit, where you're spending your money, and you make those around you aware of where they're spending their money, that in itself is a powerful tool. So if you're going out as a group of friends, maybe suggest, let's not go to that coffee place, let's go try out this place instead. And then comes in the angle of course, but then what if those coffee chains close down? Then people don't have jobs. My answer to that is very simple. Where one door closes, 10 others will open. So if one coffee chain closes, I'm sure others are prospering and need baristas as well. So let's focus on that aspect and helping our local economy grow, helping local businesses grow, while not supporting indiscriminate killing of civilians and children.
That's a perfect way to end this conversation. Thank you once again, ladies, for joining us on It's About Youth. I was speaking with Hafizah Shamsudin, media liaison from Viva Palestina Malaysia, as well as Aisyah Shofi, volunteer at Cinta, Gaza, Malaysia. I'm Soraya Mia, and we'll see you again in the next episode.